this episode of Dad is Not a Noun. I want to thank today's sponsor, the Real Dads Network, 11th Annual Real Dads Network Daddy Daughter Dance. When we empower fathers, we strengthen the family. And no better way to represent this than through a daddy daughter dance, where traditions are carried on and new tradition begins. Get your tickets fast before it sells out for this amazing Girl Dad Gala, the 11th annual Daddy Daughter Dance, February 18th, 2023 in Harlem, New York. Go to the website www.daddydaughter11.eventbrite.com.
Give you every advantage I found. Couldn't find a better fit for them, along with my crown. And since the baton was passed, hopping down. Cause failing's not an option, and dad is not a noun, not at all.
Welcome to another episode of Dad is Not a Noun. My name is Ishmael Street, changing the narrative for men of color fatherhood, as well as changing the narrative on the things I care about. And today, what I care about, I have a very special guest with me. I call her a pioneer. She's a mother first, a professor, the creator of Sunman, and also the company Olmec Toys, the one and only Professor Eason. How are you doing, and how's your heart?
I'm great, Ishmael, and my heart's fine. How about you and your heart?
My heart is good. My heart is open. It's exciting. But the reason why I asked this question because I'm all about mental health and just as a community to be vulnerable, especially for men. So that's why I posed that first question. How's your heart?
Okay, it's in great shape. Thank you for asking.
No problem at all. But thank you again for coming on the show. Um, when I think about your amazing story, your son, he had the mindset that he could never be a superhero like He-Man. And you saw that. And I like using that word, mother's intuition. That mother intuition kicked in. And you're like, you know what? I'm going to do something about it. So my first question to you is, what does mother intuition mean to you? And when that intuition kicked in, how did that motivate you to create Sunman?
That's an interesting question. I think intuition means that, and specifically mothers, is that you're in touch with what's going on around you and you have a perception of also what it means, positive or negative, the implication of what you have witnessed or what you are hearing or what you are seeing. That's and it I think extends beyond that into there's a tap in, I think, from being a mother that we all get ancestrally from the spirit, from God, from wherever we come from. That's kind of embedded in us that if we're listening to it, we can clearly hear it and see it. So I think that's what intuition means to me, acting on a feeling or listening to it.
And that's powerful. And then that when that intuition came into play, like what made you kick into gear to create the action figure and then the company?
Well, I think what made it come into play was a bit of fear. When my son said he couldn't be a superhero because he was black, I thought, oh my God, that's a scary thought. First of all, he's only 3 years old. Second, we didn't even have a television in the house. So I'm like, where does this imagery and concept seep in at such a very young age? So my first thought was fear. I was frightened by what he said and the implication of what it meant for him going forward. Meaning, if you're three and you shut down imagination in that regard because it's just fantasy, superheroes purely fantasy. If I can think I can fly, maybe I can fly. Well, I can pretend I can. So what's that going to stop you from pretending? And it goes back to that manifesting. If you can't manifest something at such a very young age, if you've already shut down what your color disallows, especially in a creative, imaginative world where there are no barriers to imagination, um, then what does that say about the rest of what you're going to be thinking? So the motivation was fear in many kinds of ways, and a fear of what message had already been put into his head, and certainly not by his married mother to a black father in the household.
Wow. Wow. And it's amazing how you use that fear as your fuel on your journey. And you had to go through many barriers through that journey. But at the end of that result, talk about that moment when your son actually held Sunman for the first time. What was that moment like for you?
Well, it was very exciting for me in order for him to see it. And I don't think I realized the impact it had for him until I went to pick him up at nursery school one day. And all the little kids swarmed around me. And I was like, oh, what's going on? And they were all really excited. And I was like, what's going on? And they said, Menelik told us you could get us any toy we want. And I was like, oh, wow. Okay. I guess he thinks if you say it, it appears. So I think he realized, that's when I realized it meant something to him because he was telling the other kids. So that made me feel very happy.
And then also that manifestation installment to your son when you think it you can happen. How did he apply that as a I think like as an adult now in his life?
Well, I think being around that kind of, you can think about anything that you want to do, you can do it, you can create your own path in life. Being around that kind of creativity and innovation, both his parents were entrepreneurs. So he is now a successful fashion photographer. And that's
Oh wow.
what he decided he wanted to go into. And he self-taught, built himself that career in a competitive environment. So I think a belief that whatever he thinks he can do or wants to do, he can do, because he saw those kind of influences around him and actualities around him. So I think that's the effect that
Oh wow.
that upbringing had on him. Not to mention, being able to go to toy fairs and be around toys and colors and graphics and designs and products all his life, basically.
and and like go into your story a little bit. You have a journalistic background. How did that help you in strategizing in that industry? Because again, you're a journalist. You've never been in the toy world, but you knew how to research. So how did that apply to your journey to creating Sunman and creating your own business?
Well, I think you said the word research. I think there were two things that helped me. When you're a journalist, you are basically taught critical thinking because it's what you have to do all the time. Who, what, when, where, how, why, and then so what. So I think I had the ability to know how to dig to get answers. So I knew nothing about the toy industry. I did know business. I also have an MBA from Harvard. Not that they taught me entrepreneurship, but that education taught me that, well, one of the lessons I learned there was you don't have to know everything. You just have to know what you don't know. And then whatever you don't know, you either go learn it yourself, you go get someone to teach it to you, or you go get someone to do it. That's like my Harvard MBA in a nutshell. So therefore, I was not afraid of the unknown because there are ways to solve any kind of unknown that you may have, but you just have to know it. I also got lucky in the fact that my lawyer had a toy client, and the
Mm,
toy client was not competing with me. So he basically gave me probably a 1 hour primer in,
wow.
okay, you need to do this, you need to do that, you need to do this. So then that set me out on the road to what I needed to do. The additional research that I applied came from not so much in the manufacturing process, because it was straightforward once you figured out how to do it, what artwork you needed, etc. You put that in place. The other part was understanding the market so that I
Mm,
could therefore explain it to the buyers, meaning the demographics, the amount of money spent in it, where the majority of Blacks are in terms of locations in the country, and our spending habits. And fortunately, back then, as we're talking back in 1985, you could actually get the Census Bureau on the phone. They were my research
wow.
department. I called them all the time, and they would talk to me, and they would answer questions for me. This was pre-internet.
That's amazing.
So everything was legwork and a lot of on the phone. And maybe because we had to do everything personally, getting introductions to people was easier than perhaps now. Now they need to know who you are. Back then, it was like if you just had an idea, getting to people was a lot easier back then. Getting people to talk to you. I was just blessed and fortunate to be able to have a conversation with Dr. Kenneth Clark, who did the Black Doll study. I can imagine it would be 15 layers to get to him today. God rest his soul.
Right.
He and his wife did the study where the black doll, the white doll, and asked the Black kids, which one is smart, which one is cute, which one do you want to play with? And they all chose the white doll,
Yeah.
which led to desegregation. But what he taught me was what everyone says now, the keyword representation matters.
Yeah.
That not seeing yourself or hearing very negative things about who you are makes you not want to be yourself or have anything to do with anybody who looks like you. Which
Yep.
is why when I taking all that into consideration, when I created Sunman, and I found out I didn't realize this was revolutionary until the last few years. His magical melanin skin. That's what I talked about in 85, because I also researched why is our skin darker, and what's the history behind why, and it's the melanin that protects
Right.
us. So that's why he developed or got all his superpowers from his impenetrable skin, and that by it being darker, it gave him more powers. So back to your question about being a journalist, I think journalism gave me a deep dive into it's not just a toy. What are all the areas circling around it that I should examine that will then lead to how it should be created?
That's amazing because, again, you were ahead of your time, especially being a Black woman in that industry. Was there pushback from the industry because you were a Black woman and you didn't have you were still learning the toy industry?
I think there were the pushback from a couple of reasons. One, it probably starts with the fact that I did not have a girl's toy.
Mm,
I had a buyer tell me people may want their daughters to play with a black doll, but they don't care what their sons play with. So the first concept was you're introducing a product category that we're not accustomed to, and we are resenting it. And as I explained to someone earlier, I didn't realize it, but girls' toys, nurturing, hair play, um, feeding, taking care of, all soft issues, if you will, not to be stereotypical. I
right.
know where we are today. Boys' toys, power, dominance, aggression, especially superhero, win, lose, boys' toys. So therefore, me not understanding it completely, by introducing a powerful Black boys' toys, I was upsetting some of these buyers' images of dominance and the importance or chipping into possibly some white supremacist notions that they may have had, which I didn't realize I was coming up against. I didn't dig that deeply into the psychology
Right.
of the buyers I was encountering. So I encountered that first of all, it was a boy's toy. that was a dominant, and suppose he beat up the other white toy, that would be a problem. Instead of they're just playing, there's always a winner and a loser. So that I didn't understand that. Secondly, because I didn't know the industry, I didn't know buyers buy in February for December,
Right.
and I was coming out in June, so I got a lot of rejection from that perspective. There were Shindana Toys, shout out to them, from coming out of Watts. They were the first black mass market toy company. So they had success in introducing dolls, but then that company was out of business by the time I came in to business. And there were just a few other toy companies out there. So yes, we were, minuscule in this very big market. And therefore, and also the other thing about the toy industry was it was pretty much an insider's club. Everybody knew everybody. It was not one of those, hey, welcoming, come on into the fold. It was like, who are you? So you definitely had outsider status the minute you came in, especially without any toy. I hadn't worked for any toy companies.
Right.
So yes, my presence, Sunman, was seen as disruptive and not necessarily welcome, which is why to find a home for it, when I found all of that, I went to beauty shops, barber shops, clubs, PTA organizations, post office where people were selling toys, street vendors, bodegas, etc., to then build up the audience, and took out a full page ad in Ebony magazine to announce it, which was how we got, awareness. Because back then, before all the multi channels, one ad in Ebony reached what 80% of all the black media consumption population in America.
That is so true. That is so true. And then when those sales start coming in, and like it took the nation by attention. How did that make you feel, proving those doubters wrong? That thought, oh, this is going to be a fad. It's going to die down. This is nothing. This is not going to even going to take off the ground. Like how did that make you feel when you saw how well it did, and it's still doing?
Well, good. Validation is always wonderful. That you have an outside proof of what is now known as proof of concept. And proof of concept says there is an audience, which I knew because I had been talking to a lot of other parents. And who doesn't? Well, it's sort of like what Black Panther has shown. Oh, there's a Black imaginative market out there that likes to see itself in fantastical, positive ways. We always knew that, but the box office proved that that's something people were willing to pay for. So that's, I think, what we proved was, yes, there's a market for Black boys' toys, that toys that look like them, that have a positive message that they can relate to. And so, of course, that made me feel good that it was accepted.
And that's the one thing too, is that being accepted, is that you already knew it, the community already knew it. It was just the rest of the world had to. You were ahead of your time. The rest of the world had to come along with you, and seeing the impact you've made in the industry, especially when you think of a Black Panther, right? And you see girls playing with action figures. Like, what does that make you feel as a Black woman? Seeing Shuri, the character, as Black Panther, and you have a little girl that's playing with her playing with an action figure of her likeness.
Again, it comes back to positive representation. You have Sherry, who is first of all, she's a genius. She's a computer wizard. So she's somebody who has not just powerful physically with magical powers and things that she can do. She's also brilliant. So she's positioned as somebody who's very smart. And we would prefer our girls lean toward their mental capabilities rather than just perhaps sexualized images that they're being bombarded with. So it feels good to see a balance here, or another method, another way to think of yourself, or what you can tell your girl she can be, other than um, somebody who's makes their living in a way that maybe is not as uplifting, let me say.
No, and I agree with you 100%. And with you, what you have done, you have uplifted a community back in '85, and I thank you for that.
Well, thank
Um,
you.
my next question is, we live in this digital age, smartphone and iPads. Children are more engaged with that. Do you feel there's going to be a lack of interest in toys because of this generation that's into smartphones and iPads and things like that?
No, it was actually kind of a issue that Lego faced a few years ago, in terms of, are kids going to really want to build things when they have so many digital products to deal with? And what they did was they decided they would go with movies or things that kids were relating to in a digital way. And that they would, do the Super Mario. They have a line of Wakanda toys out right now. But they would tie themselves to um, products that were visual and imaginative in the marketplace. So I think that is something that is going to be necessary going forward, that kids are going to need to be tied to stories that they can see digitally, or stories that they can see uh, in videos on YouTube, on TV, on cable, so that they get the full effect of the character that they are tied to. Because yes, just reading in the comic book, but being able to see a character fly has much more impact, as again we saw with Black Panther, the movie.
That's so true. And my last question, were there ever talks about a Sunman cartoon or movie?
There are ongoing talks as we speak,
Mm.
about both, you know. So we'll see what happens, and some of these talks take a long time, right? uh, they take a long time to happen. A lot of discussions, and now that we're out of COVID, I think projects that were being discussed prior to that or during that are now up for discussion again. So I'm encouraged by that.
I'm encouraged too, and you could take my money in pre-advance.
All right, sounds good.
But Professor Eason, thank you for your time. I really appreciate you coming on. Before we end this wonderful conversation, do you have some words of wisdom you want to give to the audience? Um, Whatever's on the top of your head, go for it.
Well, Ishmael, first, thank you for inviting me here. And I think when I use the word positive, and cliche, just do it. If you have a concept out there, or you believe that there is a market niche that is not being resolved, or you have an idea and you can't find it, it's like, what's that saying, is be the change that you want to see, do the thing that you want to do, create the product that you want to create, and don't worry about the naysayers, but find a way to put your imprint out here in the world, regardless of what anybody else thinks about it. So I think that's my message. And then what was always presented to me, or what I always thought about when I was in the marketplace, that when I got so many no's, I always told myself, no doesn't mean no, no means not now. I have to go
Mm.
back, rework it, think it through again, pitch it again, change it, but come back. If you believe in something, go for it. That's my words to anybody who's thinking of doing something.
That's right. And that's the one thing too. I believe that I was gonna have an opportunity to interview you, and I my dream, my belief came true. So
Oh,
thank you again. I really appreciate it. How can people find you on social media? How can people I know people can purchase Sunman if they go to toy stores and everything, but how can they find you? And what's in the future?
okay. Most of our postings are on official Sunman on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. So it's official Sunman. My own name, Yla Eason, is also my Instagram. And I don't put a lot of things there, but I do sometimes. But official Sunman is where I put most of everything that we're talking about are doing. And in the future, we're just talking about lots of other products or projects that are more visual, are more in the animation realm, that in all the categories of toys. So that's basically what I'm having a lot of discussions about right now.
Awesome. And thank you again. I appreciate your time. Again, this has been an amazing conversation. That is not a noun. Follow me on all social media platforms, YouTube, Spotify, all iTunes, and all that good stuff. Again, Professor Eason, I'm calling you Professor as a respect because I know you've been on a lot of interviews, and people call you by your first name and your last name, but out of respect to you and your profession, I'm calling you Professor. So,
Well,
Professor
thank you.
Eason, thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you, Ishmael. God bless you.